money. So we're going to be looking at how this impacts a financial manager, and following chapters to this will incorporate time value money in the financial decision making, specifically weighted average cost of capital and capital budgeting, as well as the chapter on rates. So we're going to talk about time value and its role in finance, financial management, financial decisions. We're going to talk about calculation tools, specifically Excel, because there are three ways you can calculate time value money. You can use the formulas and calculate them by hand. You could use a financial calculator that nobody but academics use. So financial calculators are something that are kind of a waste of time to learn because no one uses them in the business world. They were designed and developed primarily so students could take financial tests in college. But now that the tests are online or you have a computer to use, Excel is the most logical format to learn time value money because that is what is used in the workplace, and that's the majority of you can do much more intricate and precise problems and calculations within Excel. So even though the book will support a traditional mathematical formula and instructions in the financial calculator, the easiest and the most reliable way is to work through Excel. And since they were no longer tied to a paper test in the classroom, you don't need those financial calculators, which, by the way, can cost anywhere from $70 to $100, so sort of a waste to purchase. Some academics who've never worked in business may still use those financial calculators, so I'm not saying you'll never see them again, but people who are involved in the work world really don't utilize those financial calculators because we have laptops and computers now and do a much better job calculating this. So I'm going to talk about the concept of future value, present value, single cash flow, annuity cash flow, annuity due, ordinary annuity perpetuity. Going to be talked about mixed streams of cash flows, compound interest. We had some of that last class. We talked about retirement, and I actually used the time value money formulas in Excel to calculate that. The effective annual rate of interest, determining deposits you would need to accumulate a future sum. So say you wanted to have $100,000 in the future in 5 years, how much would you have to save each month? As well as a loan amortization or finding interest or growth rates or number of periods. So in finance, money received today is better than money received in the future. So if you have a choice of receiving $5,000 today or receiving $5,000 in 12 months, today is a better day to receive it than 12 months from now. The reason being, besides the risk of not actually receiving it in 12 months, you have the additional issue of money through inflation becomes less valuable. So this inflation eats away at the value of the money. So if you win $1 million and your choices are $1 million in 10 years or $700,000 today, you should probably take the $700,000 today because you could invest that at a rate higher than inflation and maybe even turn that into $2 million in 10 years. So really the choice is, do you want $2 million in 10 years or $1 million in 10 years? Now, we have future value and present value. So future value is calculating what the money will turn into in the future, sort of like compound interest. You put the money in an investment, it's going to grow at a certain percentage. What will that be in the future? Also, present value. We could take money and transport it to today. So we could take future money and bring it to today's value, or we could take today's money and put it into the past somewhere for comparison. So if you took the cost of college today and you looked at the cost of college from, say, 30 years ago, you could calculate the rate of growth in the cost of college, which is higher than inflation. So there are many useful abilities in this present value, and considering the whole financial system is based on loans, interest rates, growth rates, investments, these all are factored or calculated through time value of money. So this first example, suppose you had an opportunity to spend $15,000 today on some investments that would produce $17,000 spread over the next 5 years. So this is 9, 5, 14. Yeah, these are the cash flows. I'm not exactly sure. I don't quite add up to 17. All right, I'm going to move forward because this is not the right numbers for that problem. Oh, I'm moving backwards. Okay, so let's just move forward. I'm going to show you problems through Excel. Now, future value versus present value, we're trying to look at money on a timeline. So today is the present. So a dollar today, that's the present value of a dollar if it's today. What is the future value of that in 10 years at a growth rate? We could calculate, or we could even take a present value today and figure what would be the equivalent 20 years from now at a 2% inflation rate. So we could actually travel it backwards to see what the equivalent would be. So we like to plot it on a timeline as far as how, now this was the example they were actually talking about in that first slide, that this slide here, 15, you spend 15, you get 17, has nothing to do with this down here. I don't know why that's there, because this is the timeline. You spend 15,000 in year 0, so it's a negative 15. That's important for these present value calculations in Excel. Present value is usually expressed as a negative number. In this case, this is a cash outflow. You bought a business for 15. And then this is 3, 8, 12, 15, $17,000 of cash flows coming in. So just off the top of it, you could say, I spend 15, I'm getting 17, so it's a $2,000 difference. But it's not really that if you start working on that in a cash flow timeline, which we're going to show you in a second. So to make the correct investment decisions, managers have to compare these cash flows and the interests or the returns. So we have compounding and discounting. Compounding is associated with future value. So whenever you hear in a problem compound interest or we're compounding for the future, those are future value problems. Saving, compounding that base savings into some kind of future amount. Discounting is more associated with present value. So if you have a future sum and you want to discount it to today's value, you can see what that's worth. So if you win a popular lotto game, could be you win $20 million and they pay $1 million out to you every year for 20 years. That is not the same as winning $1 million today and someone giving you $1 million today. That's one sum of money. Present value of that is $1 million. But if they're going to pay you $1 million every year for 20 years, that's a smaller sum. And that's why when you have these jackpots and there's a cash payout versus a annuity over 20 years, so it might say $600 million is the prize in the Powerball. That's the prize in 20 equal installments over 20 years. If you want the lump sum, that $600 million may turn into $400 million. Because what they're factoring into the prize is all the interest they're going to earn that money before they pay it out to you. It's one of the ways they can inflate these jackpots. So if they collected $20 million and they get a rate of return on that, and they pay you $1 million a year over 20 years, they paid you a lot less than what they've collected. So it's a numbers game to make the lottery jackpot seem more inflated, but you're actually going to receive a lot less because they factor in time value of money when they do the payout. Okay, so here would be the time scale. So if we're compounding, we could take this all this money and add it up to the future to see what the future value is. So we basically would adjust each of these cash flows by a certain amount of interest or compounding to get a separate number in the future. Or we could figure out what would be the value of this today. So if I presented somebody a business, pay me the business is basically you pay me $15,000 for the business, and here are the cash flows that you're going to receive, we could see what the actual present value of that business model is in today's dollars. So we could really run it either direction. So like I said before, the computational tools we have are financial calculators, electronic spreadsheets, or cash flow signs. I don't know how that's a tool, but I just think it's misplaced on the slide. We're going to be using spreadsheets like I had explained earlier because that's what all the professionals use. So to provide a correct answer, we're going to have to indicate whether the cash flows are positive, negative, meaning what directions the cash flow is. Is it coming in or going out? Usually present value is a negative cash flow because it's money being spent to acquire an investment or acquire a business. Now, we have three different patterns of cash flows that we're going to calculate. We can have what's called a single amount. This is the easiest to deal with. It's basically saying your Nana gave you $10,000 to when you're 5 to put into a savings account for college. So that's a single amount deposited over 15 years. How much will that be when you're ready to spend it? An annuity would be your Nana's going to give you $1,000 a year until you go to college, and then you could use that to pay for college. So that would be maybe she's going to put in $1,000 a year every year until you're ready to go to school. So that would be an annuity, a series of equal cash flows. So annuity, you have to remember the cash flows are equal. If they're not equal, then that becomes a mixed stream. So a mixed stream is an unknown stream of income or cash flows that you receive over a period of time. So for example, there are situations where annuities are quite common, where the payout, sort of, you can almost think of like your wage, your biweekly wage as an annuity. It's the same amount every week or every other week for the whole year. Where a mixed stream might be something similar to someone who's working hourly. So your stream of cash is dependent on how many hours you work, so it's a different amount of money every week. Okay. So let's talk about the future value concept, which this is the first thing that we're going to calculate of these future value concepts. And this is something that you can understand a little bit more easily because this is compounding interest into the future. So what we're looking at is I want to save money, whether it's a lump sum or annuity, and that's going to earn interest, and the interest I earn is going to earn interest. So that's the compound interest. So if you think of it sort of like a starting salary, all right? There's a job fair tomorrow that you should attend. Whether or not you're graduating this semester or not, it's good to kind of get an idea of what's out there. One question you could ask at the job fair is, what is the starting salary typical for an entry-level position at your company? Say it's in marketing or in finance. What's a typical entry-level starting salary? So even if you're not going to the job fair to get a job, you could go and collect data and try to get an idea of what your salary will be. So say your starting salary is $20 an hour at one company. Another company, it's $25 an hour. So with just that information, you might want to select a company that's $25 an hour, which is roughly, if you take your per hour wage and multiply it by 2,000, you can get your annual wage. So it's $25 an hour times 2,000 is $50,000. Okay. Another good question to know, which generally hard to find out, what is the annual raises you receive at this company? So one job might say, yeah, you start at $20,000, but you're going to get a 5% raise guaranteed every year plus bonus. The other companies say, yeah, you start out at $25,000, raises are only 2%. And it could be a union job where the raises are part of a contract. So there are jobs like that where they're stipulated and then there's a little variation. So these are things, so which job is better now? The $20,000 at the 5% increase or the $25,000 at the 2% increase? Well, it depends on how long you're going to work there. If you're going to work there for 1 year, probably $25,000 is better. If you're going to work there for 20 years, probably the 5% increase, but you have to do the math on that to see which is better. So these are things that should be thought of. So you have that future value is, what is my salary going to grow into? How much is it going to be in 10 years? And then if you have the compound interest, is more like, what's the annual raises I'm going to get? And the principal is really the money you're starting out with. So these are all things that are pretty interesting. I remember I had a job in college, and my boss at the job said that nobody ever stayed here a year, and if you stay here a year, I'll give you $1 raise, and for every year you stay, I'll give you $1 raise, because the turnover was just that bad. So I stayed there a year, and then after some badgering, I got that $1 raise, but then that was quickly that policy was changed once I had stayed there 2 years, because they never expected anybody to stay that long. The job for me was actually pretty good because I could do a lot of homework there, so I didn't mind the job while I was in college, but things can change. But in the meantime, before they change, we do have some ability to do some analysis on, this also works very nicely with investments. If you have $20,000 that you want to invest today for your retirement, what will that grow to in 50 years? As it could be a single sum investment in an IRA that's going to grow tax-free for 50 years. What will that grow to given a average stock market return? Sort of what we did the other day. So here's the basic equation for future value. Future value is the present value times 1 plus the rate of return to n periods of. So this is how we're going to do it in Excel. So we're going to switch from, this is the example in the lecture, but we're going to switch to the Excel file to calculate it. And so you want to pull down this time value of money. It's the first tab. It says future value. And I think one thing I could do in the future is I'll make these tabs the same color as the headline. Okay, so we're going to go to the light blue tab. You don't have these colors, I just set them up. So it's this light blue time value money. Here's the first example. So I put this little comment in here, and I said, use future value function in Excel, in formulas menu in Excel. So how we do that is we go to where it says formulas. Is everybody with me? And we click on formulas, and then we want to click on insert function. We could also use, there's also usually a drop down for financial, here it is, financial functions, but it's, in there we're looking for future value. But if that list is not showing up, you could just click on there and you could search for FV, future value, and then double click on it to get this, what's called a formula builder box. So you want this formula builder box, and you see over here, I've labeled it present value, N per, and annual rate. So over here, where it says rate, we want to click on rate. N per, we want to click on N per, which is the number of periods. And then for present value, we want to click on this 100. So what this is basically saying is, if we invest $100 for 3 years at a 10% annual rate, what will this grow to? As you're setting that up, I'm just going to take a whirl around the classroom and see if people are on the same page as me. See how you're doing. Ooh, grilled cheese, that looks good. Perfect food for class because it doesn't smell too bad. It smells, some people bring like these stinky like microwave fish and blow out the whole class. Salad's good too. All right. Oh, good. You're right with me, like that. And demand by luxury home. Spreadsheet, engineering and analysis, in-class example. Oh, you're in the wrong class. We're in the finance class now. You want to switch that. So that's the wrong spreadsheet too. Go to Blackboard. Yeah. look under, in the top menu, it'll say Formulas, and then click on FX first, double click, type in FV, and then double click on the FV, and it'll pop up. Okay. Do you know where the spreadsheet is? In the, you have it? Okay, good. Chapter 5. That's not it.
I know, we just watched it.
Oh, wow, you want to be active and participate. Helps you learn better. Okay, I'll come back to check on you later, see if you're telling the truth on that. Yeah.
Mine isn't popping up that menu, the formula builder.
Okay, so type in FX. It's right there. That's the formula builder right there. Yeah, you have old Apple Excel. You get brand new, fresh, new Apple Excel from Stony Brook. Excel 16. Download it for free. Okay. Okay, good. Can you get it on your phone?
I just took a picture.
I saw you early today. I'm like, that dude's in my class.
I saw you take
I was just like, I didn't know who you were at first, but then I remembered, oh, he's in my class. Yeah. Hey, you'll see me more in the spring when it's warm and I walk around more. You know, today was pretty nice though. Okay. Most people, I'm glad I walked around because about half the class was doing something else, working on some other work, or, you know, I guess they just like this room is nice, maybe nice temperature. Maybe not in this class. So if you get to this point and you hit done, you should get $133.10. So let me start from the beginning on the second problem, where I go to FX and I search for FV, and I'll get the formula box. If you have old Excel, the formula box might be at the lower half of the screen. And again, I'm going to want to insert the rate, the N per, and the present value. I don't have a payment, so I don't need that. Type I could leave blank. We're going to get to that later. So if I insert these three functions, it will make the formula. And if I show the formula, this is what the formula looks like if it's written out, FV, parentheses, A5, comma, A4, comma, A3. So it's really hard to write the syntax of the formulas. That's why I suggest using the formula builder, because it's a much easier way of calculating that. So try problems 3 and 4 on your own. 3 and 4 by yourself, and see if you could calculate that. And if you already did 3 and 4, see if you could figure out how to work 5 and 6. It's a different scenario because we're talking about semi-annual compounding. So we add a new variable, M, for frequency. Yes? Are you on the future value page? All right, because that's usually number one problem. Could be on the present value page. Right. Yeah. I'll show you when I get to it. You're putting it in payment, it needs to be in present value. Just like I wrote present value. So this payment needs to go, and needs to go in present value. Was it supposed to rain today, or is that an umbrella?
No, it's not cool.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, you're safe. Okay. Oh, good. You did open it up. Yes, I like that. You get the coffee? Good, good. She's got coffee too. Imagine if this class was 8 a.m. in the morning, right? Terrible. Okay. If you get all these hashtags, it's just that you have to, you might have too many places after decimal, so if you format it to 2 places, you could also just widen the column. So for 3 and 4, 1888 and 1403 would be the answers for those 2 lump sums. So it's not bad. You put in $1,200, and in 4 years at 12%, it turns to $1,888. If I was to change that to, say you put $1,200 today into a growth stock fund, a new IRA, and you keep it there until you retire in 50 years, it would turn into $346,000. So if you invest $1,200 in, say, a little bit more aggressive growth mutual fund, after 50 years, you'll have $346,000 due to the magic of compound interest at a 12% rate. Most likely, you'll get a 10% return, not 12%. So that makes a big difference. It turns it down to $140,000. But still, I think you would agree, $1,200 today in exchange for $140,000 upon retirement is pretty good deal. Whatever money you invest in the stock market today, in an IRA at your age, and you hold till retirement, probably the Roth IRA would be a better deal because you're putting that in after tax. So when you receive that 140 or 12%, 346,000 in the future, it's all tax-free. So that's one of the beauties of being so young. Moving to problem 5, problem number 5. Here we have $1,200 for 4 years at a 12% rate, but now we're adding the frequency M, which means it's compounded, semi would be compounded twice a year. And at the bottom, there's a little chart here, at the very bottom. We have the original formulas from the textbook. These are the mathematical formulas, if those were set up. But we also have the frequency. So annual is 1, semi is 2, quarterly is 4, monthly is 12, daily is 365. Okay? So we have to keep an eye on that frequency. So when we calculate the future value, we use that same formula. So we go into formulas, and we want to get the future value. So the rate is going to be 12%. However, we're going to have to divide by M. And the N per is going to be 4 years, but we're going to have to multiply by M. So we're dividing the interest rate by the frequency, and we're multiplying the years by the frequency. The present value stays the same. Now, the reason we're doing that is you're not going to get 12% every 6 months. You're going to get 6% in 6 months, and another 6% in the next 6 months. And you don't have... in the formula where it says N per is the number of periods, so years are not numbers of periods, but years times frequency gives you the numbers of periods. So that's why we divide the rate by M, and we multiply the years by M, because M is the frequency, which is 2, to calculate the answer. And the more frequency, the higher the frequency of compounding, the larger the return. And this is a good thing because we get more money. So that's why bank accounts have a frequency of compounding that's quarterly, but your credit card will compound daily because they want more money, more profits for themselves. But when the bank wants to pay you interest for a savings account, they'll compound less frequently. So that's one way that they can manipulate how much money you get for savings versus how much money they get from lending money, right? And typically auto loans and mortgages are calculated monthly. So in this particular example, the answer is going to be, what happened? Oh, I must have had it on the wrong cell. Let's try that again. Rate divided by frequency, N per, which is years multiplied by frequency, and then the present value, which is the lump sum here. and you get 1912. So I'll let you try to calculate problem 2, which is a similar problem, but we have a 8% annual rate rather than a 12%. So we'd expect this answer to be somewhat lower because the annual rate is less. See, this is active learning. I do something, you do something, so this way you don't fall asleep. Yes? No, because we're dealing with a payment in 7. So number 7 is different. Number 7, we're talking about an annuity payment, PMT. So we're going to be doing using a different function for that. Well, same function, but different inputs in a second. I'm just going to tie my shoe because I don't want to trip later. Okay. So the answer should be 1642. So that is a lot less than the 1912. Now, so you could kind of play around here. What's nice, once I set up this calculator here, I basically set up in Excel, when you have homework or test problems, you can modify them here as well. So say, for example, we're talking, what if this compounding was not 2, but what if it was monthly at 12? So now it goes up to 1650. And if it was daily, it goes up to 1652. Not a huge change, but still more money. And of course, we know if years go up, then also the amount is going to increase drastically with the amount of years. Okay. So now we're going to move into box 7, which is calculating the future value of annuity payment. So this is saying, what if we invested $250 every year for 5 years at a 10% rate? So instead of making a lump sum, one payment only, now we're making multiple payments. So this is annuity. So this FVA is future value of annuity. But we use that same future value formula. So we use our rate, our N per, because this is an annual problem. But now we use PMT, something that you had done before by accident, but now we're actually going to use it. So the PMT is a 250. And we click done. And so this is what, and it makes sense because $250 times 5 is $1,250. So my answer should be larger than $1,250. That's a way that you kind of double check that you use the correct formula. And this is something where if you did this, this is only 5 years, but what if you did this for 40 years? Now it grows to $110,000. Because that's 40 years of saving $250 a year, which is a very small amount to save. And these, if you wanted to change the annuity to be, say, monthly, so say we wanted to change this problem where we're going to want to save $250 every month, and we want the, we'll say the, we turn the frequency into monthly is for compounding as well as annuity, then we would just adjust the values to say the rate would be divided by 12, the N per would be multiplied by 12, and the payment would also be multiplied by 12. So this would be making $250 savings every year. Okay. Oh, my friend is here, works for the Career Center. He's napping, though. I was hoping he was going to talk about the career fair tomorrow. We'll catch up with him later. So in this case, that goes up to $232,000 if you're saving that not annually, but monthly. So let's undo that. Bring it back to the original problem. So try problem 8 on your own. And if you're getting really cocky and think you're really something special, try problem 9. See if you can solve that. If you're bored and you already did question 9, which probably half the class has solved question 8, so you can work on 9. If you think you're something special. That's how I get my exercise. So. Yes. You got it wrong. I'll show you. I'll show you in a minute how to do it. As I get back down to the podium. Are you excited for the job fair tomorrow? He's really out. Okay. Now question 9. So I left a little note called use the PMT function in Excel. So this is a different function. So we go back and we want to search for PMT. And then click on PMT. So now we have the payment function. So it's looking for the rate, it's looking for the NPER, and it's looking for future value. So put the future value here. So what this is saying is annual deposits to accumulate to a future sum. So if I want $4,000 in 4 years at 8% rate, how much of a payment do I have to make on an annual basis, is what it's saying. So if I hit done here, I have to, now it's negative because it's a payment. So $887 a year is what I'd have to save for 4 years to have $4,000, and it shows up as a negative because it's a payment, and that's a cash outflow. Be careful, though, when you do the homework on My Finance Lab, because they don't accept negative answers for present value. So you have to remember that everything's going to be a positive value in the homework manager when you do present value problems. So just keep that in mind. If Excel calculates a negative, you'll probably have to switch it over to a positive. Because there really should be no negatives in time value of money because it's possible, but most problems are going to be above 0 for what we're calculating in this class. So try problem 10. I'll leave this payment function open. And I used to, before using these functions, I used to have students type in these formulas in Excel, and we used to work it out the actual formulas from the textbook. But the functions work so much more consistently and so well. All right, did you get question 10? What is your answer? $5,800 per year would have to be saved for 4 years at a 5% rate to get to $25,000. Okay, now, if you've fallen behind in any shape or fashion, you can refer back to the video later. Yes? It's just like writing a paper in college, cut and paste. So Control C, Control P, Control C, Control V. You know, it's just like how I see the papers you guys write. Just I see it in a sync site, control paste, control paste, control paste, control paste, paraphrase, 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 10-page term paper done in 20 minutes. Okay, so say you wanted to save $500,000 to buy a house in cash. So you wanted to save $500,000 to buy a house in cash in 15 years, and you're going to be saving at a rate of, say, 8%. That means you'd have to save $18,000 a year for 15 years to be able to buy that house in cash. That's why we have mortgages, because people don't want to wait 15 years to get into their home. So instead of having people pay the full price of a home, mortgages were developed years ago as a financial tool to get people into houses faster by lending them money. So when we get to present value, we'll calculate more. We'll work on how that's calculated. So let's go back to the lecture now. So this slide is basically what we just did in the assignment. So let's look at here's a graphical view of rates of return, the future value relationship. So $1 invested over 24 years, you see there's not much difference between 0, 5, and 10%, but when returns start to get to 15 or 20%, money greatly escalates. That's why if you find a winning stock like Amazon, Netflix, Google, or which is called Alphabet, that have these annual rates of 20% or higher, your money could really grow quickly. That's how Bezos became one of the richest, if not the richest person on the planet, is the extreme compounding growth of Amazon stock. And any of us here in this room could easily have become a millionaire with a small investment in Netflix, Amazon, Alphabet, Apple. All these companies could have made us a millionaire with an investment as small as $5,000 or $10,000, 15 or 20 years ago, because of that extreme compounding of those stocks. Now, those stocks are already not likely to get those returns again, so it's up to you to find the new stocks that are likely to do this, and then tell me what they are, because you're a lot closer to current trends and technologies than I am. So you find something that's going to be like a really wow technology that everybody's going to be doing, and then I want to know about it. And here's a hint: it's not virtual reality. That seems to have fizzled out. One of the reasons being it's expensive and also makes people sick. In two ways. What are two ways you can get sick from virtual reality? One is motion sickness. The other is pink eye. So if you ever, I remember there was a convention and people were trying this virtual reality on. They're all sharing those goggles, and 50% came down with conjunctivitis in a couple of days. Because no one was washing those goggles, and people kept putting them on, And then when I was being a germaphobe, I was like, I don't want that on my face. It's been like 500 faces today. They're like, you're being a jerk. You're being crazy. And then flash forward 2 days later, big red eye and all puffy. I'm like, see, I told you. You got to wash things before you wear them from other people. Like clothes, right? You wouldn't put on someone else's clothes that were dirty. You would want to wash them. Okay. Future value is single amount we covered on the spreadsheet. This is just written out in the table, how it would grow with the simple interest versus the compound interest. So compound interest grows faster for the simple fact that you get interest on your interest. Now we're moving to present value. So we're out of the future value page. We're going to move to the present value page. This concept's a little different because it's not as intuitive as saving and investing. Because we're all pretty familiar with compounding. We like compounding. We like starting at $10 an hour and getting a $2 raise. That'd be a 20% raise. It's pretty nice. But this present value is a little different because we're going in reverse. So we want to see what a future value would be worth in today's terms. So we want to discount either a series of cash flows or a single cash flow to today's value to kind of get the idea of what that field would be. So one good question would be, if you retire in 50 years and you save $50 million, what is that really equivalent to today's money? So something we can answer by using present value. So we could do a present value of a single sum. So we could do that, and it's really just future value divided by 1 plus R. So if I did that single sum, let me jump over to the present value page. I'm just going to go to the side here. Oops. The side here. All right? And I'm going to say you were able to save $50 million, that's your projected savings amount. Oh, it's only $5 million. That's your projected savings amount when you retire in 50 years. So the question is, what is that in today's money? Can you live on a $50 million in 50 years? Is that enough money to live on? You can certainly live on it today. You can easily retire on that. Hell, if it was $5 million, you could retire on that today. So basically the rule of thumb is if you want to retire today, $5 million is a nice sum of money to have. So we could discount this by, again, going to formulas. Now we're going to pull up what's called PV, present value. So we're going to say, we'll figure a rate of inflation of 3% for 50 years, and the future value is this 50 million. So what that's worth in today's terms is $11 million. So clearly, $50 million in 50 years, you can easily retire on. So you can actually, let's adjust this to 25 million. So 25 million, when you retire, will probably be a very safe bet that you could easily retire on that because it's about $5.7 million today. So if I was to retire today on 5.7 million, if someone just said, here's 5.7 million, can you retire? I'm like, you're damn right I can. I could retire on a lot less. You gave me $1 million, I could retire on that. Just work my financial magic and start investing that, and I could easily never even touch the principal and retire and live off of that. But that would be boring now because, you know, what do you do now? You're retired and you got to keep busy somehow. There's only so much Netflix to watch. So anyway, so you might want to ask, how much would you need to save every year for 50 years to get to that 25 million? So that's when we could use that formula that we just worked on before. Do you remember that payment formula? We could go to the payment formula again, and we could say, figuring out, but now we could figure, we'll figure a growth rate of 8%, which is a pretty conservative investment rate for 50 years. And we want to figure out that the future value is going to be 25 million. So this will tell us how much we need to save every year to get to that amount. And saying we need to save 43 million every year. I don't know if I believe that. Seems like a lot to have to save. But remember, if that's an annual payment, so if we divide by 12, it's about $3,600 a month to get to 25 million by the time you retire. However, if we change this, and this is with annual compounding, which really isn't that realistic. So if we switch this, I'm going to just switch this to monthly compounding at a 12% rate, and then we see a much more, this is how the difference of compounding works. When we go from compounding, I also raised it to 12%, so that's a factor in there too, because I have to divide, I could put it back, I guess, to 8% and divide by 12. That's more comparable to what we did before. Okay, so that's $3,151 a month you'd have to save to get to 25 million at an 8% return for 50 years. But if that return turns to 12% from 8%, meaning an aggressive stock fund, you only have to save $640 a year. So let me put it to you in a different way. Most likely, you'll get a pretty good 8%, pretty safe 8% return, right? Which is the 3,000. But now, if you're investing in a mutual fund that takes 1% fee, you're only going to be receiving 7%, not 8%. And that difference of being invested in a mutual fund with a 1% shoots it up to, instead of 36, 45. So we're at 31. This is with no fees. If you include fees from the mutual fund, that goes up to $4,500 a month payment you have to make. That's why there's a big controversy on index and other mutual funds that have large fees that they charge you out of your returns. It could add up to a lot of money by the time you retire. Something that we don't need to fully discuss today. But switching over to if you switch over to the present value tab, we can just do a simple present value problem. It's basically saying, if I'm going to receive $100 in 3 years at 10%, what's that worth in today's money? You know, someone's going to say, I'm going to give you either have a choice of $80 today or $100 in 3 years, which is the larger sum? So if you did the the present value calculation, it works pretty much the same way. You input the rate, you input the N per, you input now you're inputting the future value. So you have these three variables, and it's going to say that that's worth $75 today. So if someone offered you 80 versus 100, you should take the $80 today. It's more money than $100 in 3 years, based on a 10% rate of escalation. Meaning that, you know, if you got $80 today and you invested in an account making 10%, you'll have more money than if you just wait 3 years to get the 100,000. Okay, try these first 4 problems here and see if you can calculate those present values. And again, we're taking future money that you're going to receive and converting it to what it's worth today at a certain growth rate. And sometimes the way you want to look at it may be inflation, or it might be what you think you could invest that money for separately at a different level. I'll just take a lap around the room. By the time I get back to the podium, you should be done. And if you are done, you could start on problem 5, I guess you could take a look at if you wanted to. Yeah, because it's an annuity. So. Are you following along okay?
Yeah, my computer does.
Oh, all right. All right. You can always watch the video later if you want. Yeah. Okay. I can tell by most people walking around have got this correct. 75, 762, 215, and 1,025. So that's what the present value, and you see that they should all be smaller than the starting point, because these are single sum. So if you're doing a present value problem in the homework or on the test, and it's a single sum, and your result is larger than your future value, you're using the wrong formula. That's why you could use this spreadsheet once you set it up with these formulas to help you with those homeworks and the exam. Moving on to question 5. So here we have a semi-annual. Now we have the frequency, or M, as they denoted in the textbook. So it's basically saying, what's the present value of $1,200 if it's going to be compounded semi-annually rather than annually? And this is still a single sum. So when we calculate this, we just have to remember, we take the rate and we divide by frequency. Rate should be smaller, but number of the N per, number of periods, should be larger since we take the years and we multiply by the frequency. So if it's semi-annual, twice a year for 4 years, that's 8 periods. That's why N per should be 8. And then we pop in the future value. And you get 752 is the present value of this annuity. It's not an annuity, I'm sorry, this single sum. But it's compounded semi-annually. If this was compounded once a year, you see that it's discounted less. If it's compounded 4 times, so the amount that you compound, the more the discounting occurs. So you see at 365, you're only the present value is only 742. At 12 or monthly, it's only 744. At quarterly, it's 747, and semi-annually, it's 752. So the higher the frequency of compounding, the bigger the effect of the discounting. That's usually a test question. Write that down. All right. So try question 6 on your own before we get to the annuity section. Now, if you, additionally, if you need any help, maybe someone sitting next to you can help you as well. Okay. I'm moving on to question 7. Present value of annuity. So this is an annuity, so it's saying if I receive $1,200 a year for 3 years, at a 10% rate, what's the present value of that today? So just think, what is 1,200 times 3 years? 3,600. So whatever I calculate should be larger than 1,200, but smaller than 3,600, because I'm discounting these future cash flows. So again, we're going to use the present value function, but now we have the rate, N per, and this is going to be a PMT, a payment. So we're going to click this under payment. So those 3 variables, and it's going to say that this $3,600 or $1,200 a year for 3 years, the present value of that is about $2,900. So an equal choice would be you can get $2,900 today or $1,200 a year for 3 years. So you should always choose to get your money sooner than later. Just like if you were to get a job and they say, you have a choice. You only have 2 choices here. We'll pay you your full salary January 1st, or we'll pay you your full salary December 31st. You should always say, pay me my full salary January 1st. Because you could take that money and invest it and grow it. You know. Although it is definitely challenging to try to budget your money for a full year. And most of you, when you work, you'll most likely be paid on a biweekly basis. Every other week. Some unlucky few will be paid monthly, which stinks. But that's usually as far as they go. I don't think too many jobs pay anything further than monthly. All right. So if you were to calculate this over here, $300 annuity for 3 years at 6% is $800, which is larger than $300, but smaller than $900. And that's kind of how you judge if there's a new, because remember, annuity means equal series of cash flows. So 3 years of $300 cash flows, you know, at a 0% rate would be $900. So anything higher than 0% is going to discount it. So if it was going to be discounted at 12%, it goes down to $720. Discounted at 25%, down to $585. So the higher the interest rate, the stronger the compounding. Moving on to annuity payments to repay a loan. Okay, so we're going to do a loan problem. You borrowed $6,000 today. That's why it's the present value, because it's today's value. You borrowed $6,000 maybe to buy a used car, and you have 4 years to pay it back at an annual rate of 12%, and you're paying it back, you're making payments once a year. So again, we're going to use the PMT function, calculate this. So rate, N per, and then present value. And present value is negative because it's money you're borrowing, in this case. So that would make the payments, the annual payments, to be $1975. So basically, if you wanted to think about it, that times 4 means that you're actually paying back $7,900 on the $6,000 that you borrowed. And that makes sense because you're paying 12% interest. That's why if this was a credit card, you'd be paying 24% interest. So the $6,000 you borrowed would be paying back almost $10,000. But that's being calculated annually. When you calculate in a higher frequency, that changes things. So we're going to do that in a second. All right. So try problem 10 on your own. And then we'll do a hypothetical car loan, a little bit more real terms. Did you get the answer?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, all right. Okay. You okay? You excited about the job fair tomorrow? Yeah, you work for the Career Center, so you got to be on top of that. You missed it earlier. I was talking about the career fair, encouraging people to go, because even if you're a freshman, you should go. The more experience, the better, right? Yeah. And that's tomorrow, and it's for business students. I'm going to be there talking with some of the employers. So just manage your expectations. You're there on a fact-finding mission. Maybe you'll get a job, maybe you won't, but you'll learn something is valuable. So good learning opportunity, if not employment opportunity. So you don't have to be a graduating senior to go. Okay, so here is the answer. So this is $6,000 for 3 years at 10%, $2,400 a year, because it's only 3 years. But that's not really realistic because auto companies don't lend like that. So let's do an example where you're going to buy a new car. Since our simulation is on cars, we'll continue with that topic. How much does a new car cost? What type of new car would you want to have? Yes. How much is that? Go on the internet, type in new Jeep, and see how much that costs. $42,000. Perfect. So you already have it. All right. So when I go to a dealership, when I buy a new car, I do the math on a piece of paper with a pencil when I get to the financing officer to show them not to F with me, which means not to finance with me, of course. So when you buy a new car, and you probably had this experience, you go to the financing department, they're going to try to milk you for as much money as possible. Extra this, extra that. You want GPS? Do you want bigger tires? Do you want better interior? Do you want a warranty? We got it all for you, plus our own financing plan. So what I do is I go into the dealership, and I say, okay, what's the interest rate? What's the terms? And I calculate the whole loan by hand. So that scares the hell out of them. They don't bother me. I remember one time, because I went to the same dealership a few times, the actual salesperson had to go into the finance department because it was someone new and tell them, listen, just don't try to sell him anything extra. He'll calculate the loan on his own. Don't bother trying to, because they just knew he's going to waste a lot. I'll sit there forever and argue with them, be like, oh, well, the credit union is offering this rate, so at this rate, now my payment goes down to this. Can you beat that? You know, I once talked them down to 0% interest on my car loan. So, and how I did that was I checked Honda's website, and they were offering a 0% financing if your credit score was above a certain amount. So when I said, oh, I want the 0% finance, oh, you can't have that. I'm like, oh, right here it says I can. Well, that depends on your credit score. I go, I have my credit report right here. It's from today. So when I left, he said, you're the only customer to ever get that 0% financing. So, but it makes a big difference. When you're paying 0% on a new car, do you know what your rate of loan is? Your rate? How much? You leased it. Oh, okay, that's not buying a new car. But this is what if you bought a new car, so you can compare your lease payment to the new car payment in a second. How much you think an auto loan is? Do you know where you could get the best rates on auto loans? Credit unions usually have the best rates. So where does Wolfie go? Okay. So let's see. Rates. Oh, it's an annoying website already. Let's see. Consumer loans. And this is autos, new autos for, we're going to do a 60-month. The rate is $299. So used is a lot higher. See, the used rate is higher than the new car rate. So something in favor of buying a new car. So $299, that's a pretty low rate of interest for a car loan. That's pretty great. So let's see, get rid of that. Let's see how this calculates. So we're so real world now. We got actual real world rate, 2.99%. You know, they like to make that seem like it's under 3%, which it is, but not by much. Okay. So that's the rate. In car loans, how often do you pay a car loan? Someone said something? Monthly. Yeah, you pay a monthly. So your frequency would be 12. And the years are 5. So when we do this problem, we're going to go and what we had just done before, payment, PMT. Let's move this over. Okay, so payment, the rate is going to be, this is the rate, but we're going to divide it by 12. That's just 12, it's not dollars. N per is going to be the years, and we're going to multiply that by 12. So 60 payments for 5 years. And the present value of the vehicle is $42,000. So that car loan, $754 a month. That's a lot, right? How much you pay for your lease, if you don't mind me asking? Okay, so lease is a lot less, almost half. That's why leasing is so attractive, because it's a lot less than the monthly payment. However, you don't own the car after 3 years, and you had to pay money to get into the lease. So, right. So, well, that's to get the lease. You got to put that money down. For example, I lease a car. They usually get me for about $2,400 and about $300 a month lease payment. But that's a lot cheaper than buying it new and paying monthly on new. So let's say you're going to go for, you're going to put $20,000 down and you saved and only take a $22,000 loan. Now your car payment goes to $395, right? Closer to the lease. Because basically what they're looking at with the lease is when you turn that car back in, they can resell it. So they're factoring in the fact that they're going to get money back when they resell the car, so it's all factored into the price. Typically, though, in the long term, leasing is more expensive. However, so you would ask me, why are you leasing if it doesn't make good financial sense? And I would just say, because I like to have a new car every 3 years, that's why. Right? Isn't that nice to have a new car every 3 years? So you pay more for that, rather than what I used to do, which would be to have a car and drive it around for 10 years, which stinks. But when you have to do what you have to do sometimes, right? Okay, so let's go back to the presentation, and let's talk some more about this. We still have 7 minutes of class. Okay, so the present value of a single sum that we calculated, here's a personal finance problem, but I just did one for the auto loan. You could also do that same format for, say, a mortgage. So we did the present value of a single amount, present value, that's the And so you can see with discounting, the chart is flipped. So these are reciprocals of each other. So the formulas are reciprocals and the results. So the higher interest rate of the discounting, that dollar shrinks much faster at 20% versus 15, 10, or 5% shrinkage on the discounting. Okay, so before we go into this annuity section, let me just go back to that spreadsheet. And I just want to talk about a mortgage for a minute. Right? So I can easily convert, now that this payment here is calculated, monthly payment, let's look at a new house. How much does your new house going to cost? Say what's that? 400,000. Maybe you want like a nice one bedroom somewhere in Brooklyn or Queens. Maybe you can find that for 600,000. Maybe I should take away the word nice and just say one bedroom. Or studio, they kind of made into a one bedroom. 600,000. We'll go with the similar rate, but this is going to be, this is not $12. I don't like it when it's displayed like that. Put this back to 12. And how long are mortgages are typically for 30 years. So if you bought this new apartment, it's about $2,500 if you were going to put a mortgage on this new apartment, just paying for the cost of the apartment. And that seems maybe comparable. If you were to get, a nice apartment in Brooklyn or a nice part of Queens, it'd probably be about $2,500 a month. Right? So if you live there for 30 years and you pay $2,500 a month, at the end of those 30 years, you don't own anything. So that's why if you're going to live somewhere for a long period of time, say at least 10 years, it usually pays to buy. Because the value of the house, if it's $600,000 today, in 30 years, that house will probably be worth $30 million. What? Well, in 30 years ago, that house was worth $6,000. So it's not so crazy. Real estate goes up pretty aggressively. Now, if you're going to stay somewhere in the suburbs, $400,000 might be more typical for a decent house in the suburbs, and that would give you just a monthly payment of $1,600. Except there's one big difference about living in the suburbs compared to the city. That's the taxes. Typically, you're going to pay $1,000 a month in taxes, depending on where you live. And now they're not really as tax deductible, so that, living in an apartment in the city or buying a house in Long Island, you're going to pay probably a similar amount per month. But you get a whole house here, in a driveway and a place to park. In the city, you don't quite get that. So that's one way you can use these formulas to calculate what a mortgage is. Okay, so annuities, we did some annuity work already. And this is a series, an equal series of cash flows. But we have two types of annuities, ordinary and annuity due. So ordinary annuity means that the payment comes at the end of the period. Annuity due means that it becomes at the beginning of the period. So that makes a big difference because that grants you one extra period of compounding. So annuity due problems, your actual amounts earned are higher because you get one more period of compounding. And it all really depends on when that payment is made, at the beginning of the period or at the end of the period. Typically, a lot of things that we get, like car payments and mortgages, we're paying at the end of the period, the end of the month. The rent is paid at the end of the month. It's rare, but still possible that certain things we pay in the beginning of the period. So actually rent is paid at the beginning of the period because you have to pay, if you're moving to a new place, your rent is day one. So rent is actually annuity due. I'm sorry about that. But your credit card or your car loan or mortgages are ordinary annuities. You're paying them at the end of a period. Okay, so we're going to leave off here, and then we'll further discuss annuities and how to calculate annuity due and ordinary annuity next class, which is Monday. Don't miss next Wednesday's class, where we're going to discuss the exam. And don't miss the career fair tomorrow if you're somebody who would like to have a job in the future, perhaps.